The Unshackled Waves, episode 180.
By the Unshackled.net.
Hello everyone, great to have your company, and the Liberal leadership crisis has culminated today. We have a new Prime Minister in Scott Morrison. He has just been sworn in at Government House after defeating Peter Dutton on the second leadership ballot, 45 to 40, with Josh Frydenberg elected as Deputy Liberal leader. Malcolm Turnbull is out. However, he delayed the party room meeting for as long as possible to get his preferred choice of candidate in Morrison up. What will a Morrison Prime Ministership be like? Can he heal the bitter divisions between Conservatives and the moderates? That is what we'll be discussing tonight with our political editor, Michael Smythe. Thanks for coming on live again.
It's my pleasure, Tim.
Okay, so I always like to do these shows in chronological order. So we did a special live episode on Tuesday evening, and the next day on the Wednesday, that's when Peter Dutton began to make his public pitch for the Prime Ministership. He did a radio interview with 3AWR Neil Mitchell, where he outlined he wanted a royal commission into the energy and petrol retailers, and he also suggested taking the GST off electricity bills, which many people thought was a thought bubble policy on the run, because you have to get all the states to agree to it and then get the revenue some other way. And so people, a lot of political watchers weren't impressed with that initial pitch.
That's right. Dutton is struck with the same problems that a lot of other politicians in Canberra are, that they are not the best communicators. I mean, Turnbull wasn't that good a communicator. Abbott certainly isn't. Shorten's definitely not a good communicator. He's good at wisecracks and zingers, but he's not good at communicating the actual Labor platform. He will do his own thought bubbles, and he will say things along the lines of, "We want this." The big gimmicks, like the Republic, for example. They'll talk about the gimmicks, but they won't do anything about putting food on the tables of families, or putting roofs over their heads, or helping them pay the energy bills. So even though Dutton's comments may have been ill-advised, I'm still in two minds about that, to be honest. It does resonate with the people, that people see him as more than just a head kicker, someone who is more than just another version of Tony Abbott, or a Queensland version of Tony Abbott.
And it looked like the momentum was going away from Dutton on the Wednesday, because Turnbull had that press conference with Scott Morrison and Matthias Cormann, where they pledged loyalty. Scott Morrison even gave Turnbull a man hug, which was quite an intimate show of loyalty. And then there was also, in question time, the Section 44 that had emerged that Peter Dutton was under a cloud because he owned childcare centres in a family trust that were receiving Commonwealth subsidies, and Turnbull announced he was referring it to the Solicitor General. And question time was pretty embarrassing, because there was, out of the 10 ministers who'd offered their resignations for supporting Peter Dutton the previous days, 8 of them stayed on, only 2 were accepted, Dutton's and Concetta Fierravanti-Wells. They all got up in question time and said they pledged their loyalty to the Prime Minister, and nobody believed them, and it just totally shredded their credibility. Even future people who considered future of the Liberal Party, such as Angus Taylor and Michael Keenan.
There was something noted, I believe it was last night, Senator James McGrath. He actually wrote another letter to Turnbull, formally asking him to accept his resignation, citing a variety of reasons, including the base of the party. And that only happened last night. So, not last night? No, it was Wednesday night, I'm sorry. It was Wednesday night that happened. So it was still pretty much up in the air until today, when Turnbull finally agreed to have the party room meeting. There's a part of me that says, he put it off as long as he could so he could get the numbers to get his guy across the line. And even so, he cut it very close. I mean, what was the end result? Was 45-40?
Yes.
In favour of Morrison. And that was after the second ballot because Bishop herself decided to stand. But she was eliminated in the first ballot, as we know.
But we don't know how many votes she got in the end. Now, it looks like the momentum was back with Turnbull, and then it broke at about just before 7 Wednesday night that a petition was circulating amongst Liberal MPs to bring on another party room meeting. They wanted it that night, but it became pretty clear after about half an hour or an hour that Malcolm Turnbull and the whip Nola Marino had no intention of holding this meeting unless there was a majority of signatures, which is... It was worked out that there was actually no rules on when a party room meeting must be called. It's always a matter of convention. And normally, it was discussed the next day, it's normally just 2 or 3 signatures. When Kevin Andrews launched the challenge against Malcolm Turnbull in 2009, that only had about 2 or 3 signatures. The same with the spill against Tony Abbott in February 2015. That was only signed by 2 backbenchers. But Turnbull, it was reported on the Wednesday night and in his Thursday press conference, said, "I will not call the meeting unless there's 43 majority of Liberal MPs signed on a petition calling for a party room meeting. Only then will I hold it."
He didn't want to go the same way he went in 2009, but he ended up going that way anyway, because it should be noted that there are some signatures on the petition who are actually Turnbull supporters themselves. They just want to clarity. They wanted to clarify the situation. They said, look, you survive the second spill, you're safe. I mean, that almost never happens, but in fact, I can't think of a single time it has happened, but he put it off because he wanted to stay in for as long as he could. And in the end, it ended up backfiring on him in that respect. Now he's seen for what he really is, as a selfish wrecker, as the Manchurian candidate. He should be called Manchurian Turnbull, or Manchurian Turncoat, or Manchurian Terminal. I quite like Manchurian Terminal, since he's probably going to resign from the Antigua by-election just out of sheer spite. It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. And that's what Turnbull has done now.
Yeah, he dragged this process out for as long as possible. Everyone was expecting the party room meeting to happen on the Thursday because Dutton called for another party room meeting that morning. And then Matthias Cormann, despite his pledge of loyalty the previous day, flipped and appeared with Mitch Fifield and Michaela Cash to say they'd seen the Prime Minister and said he no longer had the support of the party room. Cormann said he was going to support Peter Dutton, and I think that Cormann's credibility or his integrity has been tarnished by this whole affair, because he came out strongly for Malcolm Turnbull and then flipped. And Thursday it was just this stalemate for the whole day, because they were trying to get the 43 signatures. By the end of the day, it was reported there were 42, and Turnbull said that the proposed party room meeting will be at 12 p.m. Friday if there's 43 signatures. And then in the afternoon, we learnt that Scott Morrison and Julie Bishop were going to stand if that party room meeting took place, and Turnbull wasn't going to stand if the spill motion at that meeting it's been described as probably the messiest leadership spill we've seen over the past decade. And yeah, it was just a whole, yesterday the blood was pouring out from the Liberal Party.
Oh, it was a monumental bloodbath. And I actually said this to some of my friends who are
Turn bath.
That's actually quite good. I like that. Sorry. Just try and suppress my mouth for a moment. I made the comment yesterday that it was a bloodbath and that it would end in tears for Turnbull, metaphorically, if not literally. And the only thing that Turnbull managed to do in holding off for so long is he managed to get his guy in the lodge, which is nice for him, and also nice for Scott Morrison, of course. Peter Dutton, as our viewers might recall, has been seen as a patsy, wrongly seen as a patsy for Tony Abbott. So when Peter Dutton was continuing his pitch for the leadership,
well, he was seen as Tony Abbott's preferred candidate. Patsy sounds like that Abbott was going to make a run for the leadership himself, which he didn't. The Conservatives at the end, they managed to convince Peter Dutton, who had been loyal to Malcolm Turnbull up until that point, that he could be Prime Minister, and they eventually convinced him and rallied around him, and he was in the end, Turnbull viewed him as, well, one of the wreckers.
Well, Turnbull has always hated Abbott since 2009, and Turnbull, in a way, has turned his animosity towards Dutton, even though Dutton made it absolutely clear, and I actually believe this, that it wasn't a personal thing. This was a purely political thing. It wasn't even about changing the Liberal Party's direction from progressive to back to conservative. It was just a matter of vote bank politics at the end of the day, because there are 3, possibly 4 seats that are likely to fall in Queensland alone. Dixon, Petrie, Bonner, and possibly Bowman as well. So that's 4 MPs. Dixon being the most, Peter Dutton being the most senior, of course. And it's about survival. And, you know, Dutton wasn't trying to be spiteful to Turnbull. He was trying to save the furniture. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. That's what Turnbull doesn't understand. So Turnbull turned on him, and all these stories started coming out about how Dutton may not be eligible, or he may be scandalous or controversial. And it wasn't a personal thing. If Dutton decides to make it a personal thing, I mean, I probably would if I were in Dutton's place. I'd probably make it a personal thing as well. But it's a moot point now because it's all over.
And my point there, after this episode, the furniture is pretty much on fire at the moment. I don't see a way back from this. Now, Friday is when we really entered the theatre of the absurd. We had the Solicitor General's advice that said that, in his opinion, Peter Dutton will be fine because he hasn't got an agreement with the Commonwealth, but then said, but this precedent hasn't been tested by the High Court, which is, you never assume what the High Court's going to rule, because they're always extremely strict on this. Remember that the government thought that Bob Day would be fine with his office arrangements. He was knocked out, and then we were all waiting for, like, if the petition was going to be presented. It was presented to Nola Marino, cited by her. Then she went to Turnbull to say, I've seen the petition. He was like, well, I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to call the meeting unless you show me the petition. And so, well, it would have been really interesting to see how all this unfolded. Peter Dutton went personally to present him with the petition with the 43 signatures. Say, call this bloody meeting. And then Turnbull said, I've got to verify that, they're all genuine, and call up to double check. And so the meeting was delayed until 12:20. It was one hell of a morning.
Yeah, it was a comedy of errors, actually. It's not a comedy of errors. Comedies are actually amusing. Um, Nola Marino was running back and forth between Turnbull's office and Dutton's office this morning quite a lot. You can imagine how fit she would be now as a result, just from running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. One of my contacts made the comment. He was the one who pointed out that Ms. Marino had been running back and forth to and fro between the offices. He also pointed out that the petition shouldn't have been needed to be seen by Turnbull. Turnbull should have just accepted the word of his whip, especially considering his whip is or was a Turnbull loyalist. So he should have just accepted the word. It was just a sheer spite to hold on and make everyone else hold on. Perhaps, as I've said before, to get his guy in. And it succeeded. I'm sorry, I've said that a few times, but I am going to be blunt. ScoMo is Turnbull's guy. And Frydenberg is too, by the way, but that we can discuss that later.
Well, it was I'd say Turnbull's last act of political trickery. It was designed to buy Scott Morrison as much time as possible, and it worked because Scott Morrison won on the second ballot 45-40 against Peter Dutton. Julie Bishop eliminated on the first ballot. We don't know how many first ballot votes she got. The initial spill motion was passed 45-40, which was a narrow margin, which actually means that 40 still voted for Malcolm Turnbull to stay as Prime Minister. So you can see how evenly split the party room was. And none of this was announced. Well, neither of us saw Nola Marino come out and announce this. It was all leaked to journalists. They knew first. They were all on their phones getting text messages, tweeting out the results. And Josh Frydenberg was elected deputy, 46 votes to Steve Chobo, who got 20, and Greg Hunt got 16.
And there would have been a couple of abstentions in there as well. We won't know for a couple of days at least who abstained and who voted for the party leader accordingly. Not that it really matters, because Frydenberg had an absolute majority in the party room to be deputy leader anyway. There was a suggestion earlier in the week that Morrison and Chobo would run together as a ticket for the leader and the deputy leader positions. As it turns out, that was an error. That was misinformation that was put out to us and to all journalists as well. The fact that you can never get a clear answer out of anyone, you can never get a straight answer out of anyone in Canberra, and the people who would refuse to say anything because they didn't want to lie, they didn't want to take a guess on what was happening, they didn't want to make an educated guess, and then turns out, oops, we were wrong, we're sorry. It's just, pardon me, it's funny because, a few days ago it looked like Dutton was the only man who could save not only the furniture but also give the Liberal Party a fighting chance at winning the next general election. Unfortunately, he looks like he's going to lose his seat along with the members for Petrie, Bonner and Bowman, which is unfortunate.
Well, Turnbull, even though he'd just been deposed as Prime Minister, the job that he'd wanted all his life, it was cut short. He seemed very upbeat at his outgoing press conference, clearly thinking that he'd had the last laugh, and obviously trying to take as many swipes as he could at his Conservative opponents, saying he was proud to lead a progressive Liberal coalition government, talked up his achievements. He talked about obviously lower taxes, infrastructure, of course mentioned marriage equality, and said that Australia must reject the politics of division on race and other attributes. And then said he was satisfied that the insurgents were not rewarded. It wasn't just the people that he was talking about in the party room. He was talking about the Conservative commentators in the media. Pretty much Chris Uhlmann, the political editor of Channel 9, has been his mouthpiece for this. He's been busy attacking Sky News, the Murdoch papers, and 2GB, saying they've brought down Malcolm Turnbull.
Oh, they brought down Malcolm Turnbull. It was a Murdoch press plot. Oh, give me a break. The challenge wouldn't have even happened if Turnbull had actually won a bloody news poll. That's what it comes down to. If he had won a single news poll after a streak of how many news polls were we up to this week? 39? Or was it 38?
It's 38. It's coming up to 30. Well, it's resetting to 0 now because Scott Morrison will lose his first news poll on Sunday night. So yeah, the new benchmark is for 38 news poll losses.
New benchmark is 38. Ooh, scary thought. But I have to say one thing. Actually, there are a lot of things I have to say, but most of them are not fit for general consumption. Malcolm Turnbull's speech was the most narcissistic, self-serving, self-gratifying, absurd nonsense that I have ever heard out of a politician's mouth. And I've been around a while, and I've heard a lot of politicians speak. I've heard a lot of politicians gild the lily or outright lie. But this, it stinks of the stench of rank hypocrisy. Even Munchausen would call him out on his bullshit on this. Even Munchausen would say
it was basically he was displaying his pride at being a moderate, a left-wing liberal. That was basically, you may have gotten rid of me, but you haven't won the war. Look at how I was able to do all these progressive policies despite of you, and you've lost, and so take that. That was basically what I got out of that press conference.
Yeah, and you've still got not just one of me, but two of me in the leadership and the deputy leadership. That's basically a way of saying it. Perhaps that's being a bit harsh on ScoMo, but it does seem very much like he is much more of a Turnbullite than an Abbott supporter, put it that way. The sheer rank hypocrisy of Turnbull's speech. It's like, oh, we are united. We are united. We should fight against division. You caused so much division. You did so much backgrounding against Abbott and against Brendan Nelson too, by the way. And you expect everyone to feel sorry for you? You've done nothing good for the country. You're almost as bad as Gillard. Your only saving grace is that you tried on infrastructure. Resign from Wentworth. We don't want you. We don't need you. The country is sick of you. It's not like that we like Shorten more. We hate Shorten more than we hate you. But we're sick and tired of your wishy-washy, self-important drivel. Get out. Be gone. Enjoy your Goldman Sachs retirement slush fund. Jesus.
Yeah, it's hard to complain about insurgents and wreckers when that's how you got the prime ministership in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, it's the basest hypocrisy of all.
It's good enough for me, but not for thee. That's the expression. So, and also in politics, the golden rule is if you live by the sword, then you die by the sword. So Turnbull's been undone by how he got the job in the first place. Now.
Not to mention how he got into Parliament either. You remember how he got into Parliament?
Oh yes, Peter King, their branch.
He rolled a sitting MP.
First term MP.
Exactly. And, then he got promoted. Actually, in fairness, he got promoted quite quickly because he is an intelligent man, to be fair.
And
Just
he
because
and
I despise him doesn't mean I can't give him
he and
credit
John
for
Howard
it.
had this weird political friendship, even though they're from different parts of the party. It would be interesting, now that I've mentioned him, to see what John Howard says about all this, because he gave a press conference after the changeover from Abbott to Turnbull. It'd be interesting to see what he says here. Now, Morrison spent the afternoon, we thought he was going to be sworn in immediately, but he was finalising the new coalition agreement with the National Party, which the Nationals, they always try to exploit this situation by trying to get more sweeteners for their constituents, and so that's all that is. Nationals trying
Well,
to...
they should try harder. I mean, the people in the country are suffering. The Nationals need to lift their game.
Well, everyone was wondering whether there'd be there would be a twin clean sweep of the coalition, whether McCormack might get rolled and replaced by Littleproud, but looks like that McCormack, he'll stay there, which is, well, no one's been impressed by him.
That's probably the politest way I could put it. Yes. Excuse me. Sorry. There was one more thing I was going to say, actually, in regards to the process of removing Turnbull this time around. It was about, again, it was something to do with energy or climate change. The reason why the NEG, or the negative energy gimmick, as I'm notorious for referring to it, was to do with our supposed commitments under the Paris Accord. And as a result, the backbenchers revolted and said, no, this is not good enough. You've got to start listening to the base. You've got to actually take tangible steps to bring down the cost of power. And it hasn't been done. Turnbull tried to, save his skin by making a couple more compromises, but it was too little too late, as evidenced by today's events.
Yeah, and we heard later in the afternoon, Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg had a joint press conference where they said it's the next generation of Liberal MPs taking over, trying to hint that the Abbott-Turnbull saga is over. And it's important to note that both Morrison and Frydenberg, they were first elected after the Howard government, so they're not leftovers from the Howard era. And Scott Morrison talked about that we're going to be focused on you now. It's about the people, and he talked about how he wants to have a stronger Australia with making sure that more people can get ahead in life. Not one person winning doesn't mean the other has to lose. And it was, to me, it was just it was just motherhood statements. That's all it was. There was zero policy at all. It was just some, nice words where if you were a sucker, think like, oh, that's, nice to hear. That's a really good speech. But there was absolutely no policy at all. That he wasn't taking decisive actions to rework the NEG or anything like that. We got nothing.
We got nothing but a change in leader, and that's all we got, and a change in deputy leader, because Bishop did not contest the deputy leadership either. She just contested the full leadership. Speaking of press conferences, that was the other thing I was going to say before I was distracted and lost my train of thought. John Howard, you mentioned John Howard did his press conference after the rolling of Abbott by Turnbull in 2015. After Turnbull got rolled by Abbott in 2009, he actually took Turnbull aside and said, look, stay in the parliament. If you want to be prime minister, you've got to stay in the parliament. Just wait it out. Your time will come. And obviously he would have pointed to his own example of being rolled as leader. God, how many times was he rolled as leader? It was 2 or 3 times at least, I'm pretty sure, that Howard was rolled as leader.
No, it was only in 89 he was rolled. That was when he first lost the leadership in opposition. You're talking about his when he lost leadership contests. He lost in '83 and he lost in '93 as well.
Yes, that's right. And what was the joke he made? Him becoming prime
Lazarus
minister
with a triple
Lazarus with a
bypass.
triple bypass. It's a beautiful line, though, and you've got to give it to Howard. He's very poetic, a very, very, very intelligent man. But in regards to, and with all due respect to Mr. Howard, I hope he shuts up on this. And that's nothing against him. That's just pointing out the fact that we don't, not just we as journalists, but we, the people, we're kind of hesitant to put stock in what former prime ministers say, especially considering their own experiences with the leadership contests. I mean, actually, every prime minister except for since Fraser, actually, has been involved in a leadership spill, win or whether they won or lost, and instigating it. So every single one. So Fraser, Hawke, Keating, Howard, Rudd, Gillard, Rudd again, Abbott, Turnbull, and now Morrison. So that's 9. That's 9 prime ministers in Australia's history where we have, or rather they have, had the involvement as more than just spectators in terms of deposing a sitting leader, whether it be in government or in opposition. It's irrelevant.
Well, opposition is a bit different because the leader is not elected by the people. It seems to be in the last 10 years it's been in reverse, that being opposition leader is safer, being the prime minister is probably more dangerous, because the stats been repeated today that no prime minister since John Howard has been able to
serve a full term.
Yeah, serve a full term. And a lot of political commentators have been saying, oh, I've been speaking to my counterpart overseas and they're saying, what is it with your country? Like, you keep churning through these prime ministers. And yeah, it's I remember growing up, we all thought that John Howard would be prime minister forever, that we were never going to get rid of him. He'd just be there forever. And it's now our prime minister can't even last an electoral cycle. It's been an amazing transformation.
Mm-hmm. I have often toyed with the idea of actually extending the electoral cycle at the federal level to 4 or even 5 years, so this shit doesn't keep happening. On the upside, there's a lot of humor that can be taken out of this. There's that fire safety meme. Remember, kids, change of prime minister means it's time to change your smoke alarm battery. Yeah, so there's that one. That's my sister. She'll get a laugh out of that.
The memes have been awesome today. We do wonder whether we'll ever get out of this cycle. But the thing that's interesting about this leadership change is that the new Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has the endorsement of the previous Prime Minister in Malcolm Turnbull, which means that Scott Morrison is not going to shit on the legacy of Malcolm Turnbull. And there's obviously no ex-bitter Prime Minister for Morrison to worry about. And he's got clean hands in this, because Malcolm Turnbull said, if the spill motion succeeds, I won't stand. Scott Morrison said, well, in that case, I'll stand. And he won. He's almost got no blood there. In fact, what the moderates are saying is that all the blood is on the conservative, bitter conservative people. We're the ones who've prevailed in the end, and so you've got what you wanted, a new leader. So game over.
A new sacrificial lamb. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? I was actually, when you mentioned there's no bitter ex-prime minister, I was going to say Tony Abbott might like a word, but
he's got rid of Turnbull now. Like I think it was more important for Abbott to bring down Turnbull than whoever replaced. I mean, obviously he doesn't like Morrison either, because he wrote that scathing op-ed directed towards Morrison when Morrison rubbished his immigration proposal. So there's still not a lot of love lost there.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. I don't think Tony Abbott is going to be calling ScoMo and saying congratulations for rolling that bastard Turnbull, which is what John Gorton did to call Bob Hawke in 1983 to say congratulations for rolling that bastard Fraser. I don't see that happening. I mean, yes, Abbott probably won't try and wreck Morrison because he doesn't hate Morrison, he just doesn't like him. He just thinks he's dishonest and treacherous. Whereas you could objectively say inside the Liberal Party, at least the feeling of certain MPs, that Turnbull has been objectively treacherous and dishonest and extremely hypocritical.
But also, what the reason why Conservatives today were bitterly disappointed is because Turnbull, although he's gone, his chief policy makers are in charge. Scott Morrison was the treasurer, in charge of putting through probably the most controversial one were those superannuation changes, the company tax cut failure, and of course Josh Frydenberg, Energy Environment Minister, designed the neg. And so at that press conference Monday when they were announcing the new neg, Malcolm Turnbull was with Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison. So basically Malcolm Turnbull's left the room, and it's those two of his lieutenants that are in charge now.
Exactly. These are my lieutenants. I was going to say something else, but I remembered this is a live stream. These are my lieutenants. Where you see them, you see me. That's basically how Turnbull paraded it, and he pulled it off. Never underestimate the power of sheer spite in politics.
Now, obviously, Morrison, he was the choice of the moderates and the New South Wales. We shouldn't say moderate faction. We should say left faction. That's how he was able to get over the line. But he is a Conservative at heart. He was the immigration minister under Tony Abbott. He was considered the star of the Abbott cabinet. He was the one to stop the boats initially. Then he moved to social services. He's a devout Christian. In the end, he couldn't support same-sex marriage when it came before the Parliament because there was no protection for religious liberty. And at the end of last year, he said that I want to make sure that in this new era, religious liberty is protected. And he talked about his faith in his first speech. So he actually is a Conservative, but that seems to have been forgotten because of the treachery he showed to Abbott in 2015 and the fact that he was Turnbull's treasurer and basically tied to Turnbull's policies, and basically has Turnbull's progressiveness has rubbed off on him, and he's got a huge task of basically saying to Conservatives, I am one of you at heart. You need to learn to trust me again.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. Even if, and I am inclined to agree and give ScoMo credit for that. But even so, and I don't know if I said this to you, if I said this to someone else earlier today, it doesn't matter what ScoMo does to try and bring back conservative thought to the Liberal Party. It's gone far, far too left now for it to be anything other than a rich man's Labour Party, which it has been since Turnbull took over. And it's not going to change that. Even if he tries to do that, he's going to be put in a figure-8 lock by Frydenberg, who is very much a lefty, very much a moderate, very much part of
he was first elected in 2010, Frydenberg, from the Conservative faction. He was deemed a Conservative back in those days, but because...
but so was Christopher Pyne at one point as well.
Yeah, but Kooyong being... Well, it's becoming a more inner city Melbourne seat. Obviously, he's been captured by that, his constituents, and is now seen as a progressive.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Anyway, Frydenberg will stop anything Morrison tries to do to correct the drift, the necessary... Sorry, let me start that again. Frydenberg will do anything he has to do, everything he has to do, if ScoMo tries to reverse the drift or even just suspend it where it is right now, it's not going to, the Liberal Party is not going to have a revival of conservative members or conservative policy positions at the end of the day. Because no matter what Prime Minister Morrison wants to do, it's not going to work. It's going to be thwarted the same way Tony Abbott was thwarted. I mean, how many? I could go until the cows come home in terms of the number of times Tony Abbott was thwarted in trying to make the Liberal Party somewhat remotely conservative.
And it looks less likely that Morrison will want to bring back what's known as the Triple A team: Tony Abbott, Kevin Andrews, Erica Betts. Because in his press conference, Morrison said this is a new generation now, and of course the three of those, they've been around since the Howard years. Kevin Andrews is the father of the house, and so I don't think that he's going to want to, of course, being Turnbull's choice, he's not going to reward the so-called wreckers and insurgents. And so, yeah, Morrison, I don't think he's going to bring back any major conservative people.
No, I don't think he will. He definitely won't bring back Andrews. He probably won't bring back Abbott unless he is able to, unless he begs Abbott, and Abbott's still not salty about being betrayed in 2015. Dutton, he might ask Dutton.
Dutton will stay, but Dutton is a goner in his seat now in Dixon.
Yeah, exactly. So, if I was Scott Morrison and I were taking instructions from Turnbull from the shadows, I'd be saying, you know what, just let him have his portfolio. He'll lose at the next election anyway. He'll lose his seats, so...
And the fact when Get Up is like relieved the fact that there's no Prime Minister Dutton, and the ABC are saying, oh, Scott Morrison was such a better pick than that right-wing zealot Dutton. And if you're already the ABC's favourite, and Get Up is breathing a sigh of relief, then obviously you've got...
the Liberal Party fucked up. I'm going to call it that now. It's just window dressing.
Well, he's got to do a lot more to... Morrison's got to do a lot more to intimidate the left, it seems.
Yes, well, hopefully whoever takes over as treasurer... Frydenberg's taking over as treasurer.
Yes. He could pick his own portfolio.
Right. And here I was thinking that maybe we'll get someone who actually decides to tighten the belts and the purse strings, but no, we're done. I'd like Frydenberg to prove me wrong. Actually, I actually hope he does, because I'm sick and tired of being right over the past week. It's getting depressing, to be honest.
But the Liberals are going to lose the next election. There's no doubt about that. Now, I mean,
this is what makes it a fait accompli. It's now a fait accompli because of the fact that Dutton would have given them a fighting chance, but rightly or wrongly, the fact that Morrison is now Prime Minister, it's just business as usual. Nothing's going to change. We might as well just throw the Liberals out and give Shorten a go. God help us when that happens, but...
And Turnbull was still the preferred Liberal leader, even with the polls in dire straits. The public was like, no, we want to stick with Turnbull, and so they've actually gone with a less popular leader and had this blood-letting episode where not everyone's satisfied internally, and so you just think, how do they recover from that?
Well, they can't. The short answer, because we've only got a little bit of time, is they can't recover. I mean, even if Dutton had won, it would have been extremely difficult for him to win the election. He would have kept his seat, but he still would have lost the election. With Morrison in charge now, he's going to be seen as Turnbull 2.0 or Turnbull Light, rightly or wrongly. And the Conservative membership of the Liberal Party is not going to marshal its numbers out for Morrison. They're going to give up. They're going to say, look, it's time. Maybe we should just give it over.
Uh, like I said, I'm still. I'll see. I'm giving Morrison the benefit of the doubt. Let's see if he can unleash his inner conservative. But yeah, I think Morrison, he'll lead the party into opposition. I think that he'll have a brief stint as Prime Minister and be opposition leader, hoping that he can drag Bill Shorten down in one term when he and Labor pretty much wrecked the economy and put the unions in charge. So I think he's in for the long haul. And remember, his chief rival, Peter Dutton, will be gone at the next election anyway. So I think that, yeah, Morrison's going to be around for a while. Whether the base can warm to him again, whether he can make the left afraid once again, these are all unknowns. But it's been another tumultuous day in Australian politics. We enjoy these days as political junkies, but yeah, they're in the pub tonight. Everyone's saying, "Why have you teared down another prime minister? What is wrong with you?"
Oh, last night actually, when I was out, my Uber driver said that to me as well. Why can't we just keep Prime Minister in for the whole term? It's like children in the playground fighting. That's how he put it to me, and he's right.
I think Greg Sheridan's had the joke that the Chinese, they're pretty satisfied with their system of government at the moment when looking at Australia. President for life. That's
President
stability.
Xi.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. President Xi, incidentally, who now has even more power over the Communist Party than even Mao did, which is a very scary thought if he ever looks south to Australia. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, we've managed these two live episodes this week quite well. We were able to go not just Facebook Live tonight, but YouTube live as well, with no major technical difficulties. So it's been an exciting new innovation in the Waves podcast, because we know with events as fluid as they are, that if we pre-recorded this, it'd get dated probably in an hour.
Very quickly it would be, yes.
Oh, well, thanks again, Michael, for joining me. I'll just end with the normal reminders. So tomorrow in Melbourne is the March for Men, which is happening at Federation Square. It's designed to bring attention to men's issues and say that it's okay to be masculine. Sydney Watson, rising local social media personality, is organising it. The Campaign Against Racism and Fascism, along with the National Union of Students Women's Department and its LGBT division, organising a counter-protest, because apparently it's a rally full of far-right racist and bigoted people. So we'll be there to cover the event, the Unshackled, from both sides. It'll certainly be an interesting day, given that this is Sydney Watson's first public event, so we sort of don't know what to expect. We've still got a lot of speakers coming to Australia. Next month is former UKIP leader and Brexit champion Nigel Farage. He's visiting all the major cities as well as Auckland. So tickets are still on sale. You can get them by going to nigelive.com.au. Also, Gavin McGuinness, the founder of the Proud Boys and CRTV personality, he's coming this November. He's being hosted by Penthouse Australia. The left, they're not doing a good job at deterring these speakers, because they keep coming out. They're organising I should give a shout out to another anti-fascist organisation yelling at racist dogs. They just choose to yell at attendees that they're racist. They made a fool of themselves in front of Lauren Southern, so they're going to be there. They've been trying to make fun of the Proud Boys, calling them incels, that sort of thing. It's really funny, but I digress. If you want to book your ticket, you can go to gavinlive.com.au. Also, we can't keep doing or keeping you up to date on all the current events, doing all these podcasts without your support. So please consider becoming a patron of The Unshackled at patreon.com/The Unshackled. So thanks once again for your company, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Unshackled Waves. Please visit theunshackledwaves.net for all the ways to subscribe and follow the show. Don't forget to pick up your free ebook at theunshackledbattlefield.net and keep checking out theunshackled.net for all the latest news and commentary.